Hello and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses. My name is Lisa. We're working on our stitch sampler. We're going to do 5 variations of buttonhole stitch today. These are all going to be different from anything that we've done previously. We may actually end up doing 6 seams because one of them I think we're going to do 2 slight variations of. So this is either our 7th or 8th video on buttonhole stitch. We have 1 more week to go and then we're going to be switching over to chain stitch. I do want to tell you that there are so many varieties of buttonhole stitch that we haven't even touched. Maybe at some point in the future we will expand on buttonhole stitch, but I think we've gotten quite a few here in the weeks that we've been doing buttonhole stitch. It should give you enough to work with for a while. Let's go ahead and get started. I keep getting the question about what needles I'm using. And my favorite have definitely become these Bohin Crewel embroidery needles in the size 7. I find that fits my size 8 and 12 pearl cottons. I've stitched up to 6 strands of embroidery floss with these, although I think it's more comfortable up to about 4 strands. I rarely stitch with more than 3. These are overwhelmingly my favorite. They're sharp, they've got a nice eye, they go through the fabric well. As I said, overwhelmingly my favorite needles to stitch with. So other supplies, I've got my little embroidery scissors. These have a little serrated edge. I like the sharp points on them and they work really well. I've got my 1-inch Omnigrid quilting ruler. I also have my 3/16 inch dot grid, and this is from jukeboxquilts.com. None of these are sponsored. These are all things that I have purchased myself. I always have the links for the supplies that I'm using in the description box below the video. I know if you're watching on TV, you can't always see those. If you pull up the description in the YouTube app on your computer, an iPad, a laptop, or your phone, then you can see that description, and there are affiliate links for the things that are available through Amazon. And so that will include things like my little embroidery scissors, the Omnigrid ruler, the Bohin needles. All of those things are listed, including my embroidery frame, the stretcher bars, and the thumbtacks that I use. All of that is included in there, and sometimes I list threads if I'm using something specific that I can get a link for. Just know that that is a resource that is available to you should you want it. And your support through those affiliate links really does help my channel, so I deeply appreciate your purchases through that. Let's go ahead and get going on today's block. The first one that I would like to do is a stitch that is really a combination stitch. It's a buttonhole combined with a herringbone. It's got a really unique look, and it's one that you often see on vintage quilts. We're looking at a seam that's relatively geometric. I am going to measure it out, and so we're just going to use a 1/8 inch measure. And I want to think about these different seams. This one takes up just a little bit of space. I do have one that's going to take a lot of space. And so I think I'm going to save this one for that so that we can build out this area down here with that stitch. It's always hard to know exactly what I want to do because I really want to try and balance my stitches. I have not drawn a stitch map on this particular block. We're going to kind of wing it as we go. I'm thinking this one can sit into this center somewhat. Let's do it on this seam, and it's going to sit above this block. So I'm going to put my little gauge on here. I'm going to be using 1/8 inch mark, so 1 at the corner. I'm trying to angle it so it's a little easier for you to see. We're just using that little twisting motion and making a dot. I don't want huge, big marks on this one. I just need enough so I can see where I'm going. And we're going to mark one other line. So here's my seam. I'm going to go 1 or 2 past that just so I can see. Let's make another line about 3/16 of an inch above that. I don't want to go a long way. On this ruler, this black line is my 3/16 inch line. And so I've just lined it up all along the seam, and I'm just going to make a really, well, I say a light mark, but it still has to be dark enough that I can actually see it. And that's all we're going to need here. That's all on pink, so let's use a green thread. Let's use this variegated green. I think that'll show up nice against that pink. And so for this one, we're going to start off with the beginning part of the herringbone. One of the things this stitch is going to do is it's going to come, we're actually going to just tuck the little ends down below this a little bit. So I actually think I need another line now that I'm looking at it. And this one, I'd like to do just 1/8 of an inch. I don't want to go too much. These, I'm lining up the seam on these hash marks here, and I'm going to draw that line there. I think that should be all the lines that we need. I'm going to start by coming up down here. Is that where I want to go? No, let's start down here. On this one, I want you to think that we're working in patterns that are 3/8 long. And so we're going to come up, and I probably should have marked that one there. And we're going to go right up there. All right. And then we're going to come up, and I'm just going to come up roughly in here where I think it should go. And then here is going to be the bottom of our first stitch, but I actually want to be out above that. So I'm just going to eyeball, and I'm going to come back to my line. There's our first buttonhole. Now the second one is going to be here. I'm going to line up with the top of that one. Come down. There's a second one. Here's for the third one. Again, we're coming down to that line. And now we're going to count 3/8 over. So there's 1, 2, 3. So I want to come down here. And this time we're going to come back. And we're going to come straight down below this one. You could vary this. It doesn't have to cross over quite so much if you don't want that. I have stitched this that's a little smaller. But now we're going to just stitch based on where our dots are down here on those 1/8 inch marks, trying to keep my tops nice and even. Now we're going to count over 1, 2, 3, and we're going to come down straight on that bottom line. Now we're going to come back up, this time straight below here. Now we're going to come up here. We're going to come up even with what we've been doing. I'm just eyeballing it. You don't need to measure it all out. And then we're going to keep doing the same thing. And if you feel like your stitches are a little uneven, then stab stitch it. You can use your thread as a guide if you need. So if you're using your thread as a guide, you're holding it down and coming up on the inside on that line. Now we're going to count over 1, 2, 3, and we're going to go down over here. And we're going to come up straight underneath here, so it should be just a little bit back here. And it doesn't matter which one you want to do. If you wanted to do it so it came at a steeper angle and have less of a cross, you can certainly do that. And I'm just scoop stitching these because the positioning is just right for me to be able to do that, and I have enough give in my fabric. So 1, 2, 3, we're going to come down over here. Then we're going to come back up straight under here, come back out. And so remember, my seam is right here. At least that's where my basting stitch is. The lines that I originally drew have sort of, oh, actually my seam is right there. So, but I still need to carry that out. So I'm going to go ahead and carry that out, and I'm just going to make that stitch so I know I have the pattern right, and I'm going to end it because I'm actually out in my seam allowance. So this blue line is my seam. Here's my basting, so you can see I've got a little bit of a space here, And that seam is done. So it's just a little herringbone. Now I'm seeing I've got one thing that I need to go back and do. Up at the beginning, to complete that pattern, I actually need a very small buttonhole stitch right there. So let me knot this off on the back and then we'll take a look at that. So on this one, I'm going to come right at my seam here, which means that I'm going to be working on that side of that seam probably. I'm going to go ahead and actually use that diagonal just like it would be here, and I'm just going to make that stitch here. And I actually think, as I'm looking at it, I need to make another one to complete that, but I'm just going to take it down to that seam. See, and how it just finishes it off? Now that seam looks finished, and there's nothing gapping or looking unusual on that. So I'm a lot happier with that one. So that is our herringbone buttonhole combination. It's a vintage seam. You see it on a lot of antique crazy quilts, and one that I don't see done very often anymore. Do you remember this block? This might have been the second block we did, but we did this closed buttonhole, and then we did this one with the closed but with the vertical in it, and then we did this triangular formation. The next one that we're going to do is going to be fairly similar to that, and I'm thinking let's do that one here. We are going to mark this one, and so I'm going to mark a 1/8 stitch, a 3/8, a 1/8, a 3/8, a 1/8, a 3/8, a 1/8, and then a 3/8. And then on this one I want to come up. You could come up, you can make these really steep and narrow. You've got all sorts of ways that you could stitch this one. But I think for today, let's take it up 1/4 of an inch. I think that'll be fine. And again, I'm just going to draw my line here. I just need enough to see. By the end of the day, those marks are all gone. So on this one, I'm going to start here. I realize as I'm doing this, I know what I'm doing, but you may not be able to see that as easily. So we're just going to roll that straight up. I want to make sure that my 1/8 inch marks are lining up with the marks underneath. Where we're in our 3/8, there's 2 in the center. So now we're going to have 3 and 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3. Do you see that, how they offset? And that's going to be important on this one. I don't mark that. When I'm stitching this, to be truthful, if I've marked, I only mark the bottom line and then I eyeball the rest of it. But you may need to do more than that. So this particular one here, I'm looking at my pattern, and it's going to come up here, and then it's going to go this way. Just for our purposes today, I'm going to come over, and I need to be on the inside of that. I don't want to pull my thread out. We're putting a little space in between our triangles on this one. So it's a slight variation on that triangular formation, but it's often called a crossed buttonhole. Now we're going to come here. So we came up here, down there, came back up in the next one over. This time we're going to go down on that one, and we're going to come up on this one. And see, we almost have a little teepee shape there. So now we're going to go down on this one, the far one, but we're coming back up on this one. So we have our short leg. Now we're going to go down on the near top one, and we're going to come back on the near bottom one. You see what we're doing? So we've got little teepees with a space in between them. Go down on the far top one, come back up on the far bottom one. And now we're going to work on the near ones. The near top, near bottom. So we're always going down on the top, coming up on the bottom. Go down on the far first, come up on the far bottom, down on the near top, down on the near bottom, and then you can take that off and finish it. And there you have crossed buttonhole. So a slight variation on the triangular buttonhole or closed buttonhole that we did previously. You can certainly stitch those right up against one another like we did with the closed buttonhole. So if you're looking at that one, even that one we have a little space in between. But when we did this one, we really left very little space in between. It's almost a minute invisible stitch. So lots of possibilities with that one. This is take 2. I just stitched this whole seam and realized I didn't turn the camera on. So we're doing it again. I'm doing it again. Let me show you what I did. I have marked lines 1/8 of an inch apart from just over my seam here. I'm going to mark this top one again because it's getting a little bit faint. This is easier if you're doing it not on your embroidery frame. And then they're every 8th. So my seam is 1/8. Some of these are fading, so I'm going to remark them because I do need to see them. Hold your ruler as still as possible when you're marking. We're just going down. I may be in a slightly different place than where I was previously because we're stitching from scratch. I'm marking past my seam because we often have to carry this one through. The top of our seam is not going to be to the line. The lines are to mark the base of our seam. I also have marks roughly every 1/8 of an inch as we go down here. I do want to carry through. Now we're going to be working on a pattern of stitching every 3/8, and so I need to pay attention here. So we're actually going to stitch a little bit above. I need to mark this here. Here we are. Here we're going to go above like so. I'm looking at my mark down here and I'm going to come out kind of under my seam and I'm going to come out just above that line. Think about maybe a 1/16 of an inch above that line. And now we're going to come down here to this line down here. And so we are 1, 2, and we want to go to 3. And we're going to come up here a little bit above that line. And now we're going to make our first real buttonhole stitch. So we're bringing that back down, come up inside of it. So you can see we've got just a teeny tiny. I did that on the first go round as well, where my stitching pulled loose. And partly that's because it's this batik fabric. And I might have a little twist in my thread here. That's exactly what happened. I had a little twist in it behind. So apologize for that mess there. So this bottom block has pulled out down to about here. And so I just need to hold that and make sure it stays in place. Now I'm going to mark up 3 of my 1/8 inch marks, and they're a little hard to see here. I guess I need to mark those again because I can't tell exactly where we're at. Mark it all the way down there, and that way I can see what I'm doing here. So I'm coming out past my 1/8 inch line, going just above it. I'm going to hold my thread down, vertical, come back up inside of it. That helps this stitch stay perpendicular to this line here. If you're not doing that, the tendency is for those stitches to all want to lean in at the top. So here's my mark. I'm going to come up just above that line. Hold it down perpendicular to the seam, come up inside of it. These are just regular buttonhole stitches done about 3/8 of an inch apart. And there's my mark coming up above. And you'll see in a minute why it's important to have that. So just ignore the marks on this line because they're not where I'm at. And that's just because we've had to start over. Okay, there's my mark. Come up over that line, come down perpendicular, come up just inside on that line. So here's my mark, come up above the line, come up just inside the thread. And now we're going to come and do one more to finish our pattern because, and I need to pull my thread down, the needle. And then I'm going to lock that one there. So my seam is here. That's where my basting line is. My blue line is actually about here, but I want to finish that pattern off. And I want to finish out here in my seam allowance. Now, you can stitch going back the other way, but I don't like the pattern of it as well. I don't think it looks as finished. It looks a little awkward to me. So I'm going to knot it off at the end of each line. So when I had to tear all of this out, that meant none of that thread was long enough to be reusable because I only have whatever that single row of stitching was. And we're working on a triangular piece and they get smaller as we go. So now the next one is going to come up 1/3 of the way over. We're coming up halfway in between our seam and that line now. And I'm just going to go straight down and make a straight stitch that hides underneath that other seam. It was providential that we are using this loose seam for this one. Now, the next stitch is going to actually come up here just to continue my true stitching pattern. Pop that back down in there. Again, we're coming up. Here's the top line, the seam, and that line. We're coming up halfway in between those, but 1/3 of the way over. And this one would be coming out from under that piece of fabric. All right, so now we can continue on. Now this one we're going to come 1/3 of the way over, halfway in between the two lines, hold it out perpendicular, and we're going to continue on like that all the way across. So 1/3 of the way over, but halfway between the lines. Hold it down perpendicular, come up on the inside of it. 1/3 of the way over. I'm just eyeballing it. Now we're the next one over, 1/3 of the way over. Whoops, moved my needle. Halfway in between the lines. Hold it perpendicular, come up on the line below. Now next one is 1/3 of the way over, halfway in between. And you could vary the spacing between your lines. If you want your vertical threads to be the same distance apart as your lines, then I would, and we should be pretty close on this one because we're really working with about 1/8 of an inch spacing. So here I'm at my seam. So my seam is here, but I need to carry that stitch through for it to look correct. And I'm going to come up and just finish that stitch off and then lock it down. And then I'm going to turn it over and make my knot. I didn't tell you, since I'm refilming this, I'm having a little hard time remembering exactly what it is I'm trying to tell you. So what we're doing here is what's called a battlement stitch. And it is really a filling stitch. And so we're going to fill this whole patch with this. So we were above the line there. We're in between the lines here. Now we need to be in between these two lines. And since I can't come up with my full buttonhole stitch here, I'm just going to come up here. And so now I'm sort of splitting the difference. I'm halfway in between these two stitches and halfway in between my lines. I'm right in the center of that little rectangle. There's my stitch. I'm going to go down, and I really want to, if I can, go underneath that other patch just to make it look a little bit more proper. And then we're going to come up on the line down here, and that's because we're working against this diagonal edge. If you're working on a square piece, you would not be having to hide those edges in here. So now I got to think, where's the top of that next stitch? So here's 1, 2, now we're in this gap, center. Hold it down so it's perpendicular. Come up down here just on the inside of it. And then we're going to go to the next one. 1, 2, 3, right in the center. Now you'll notice that it looks like you're forming new kind of odd gaps in here. And that's fine. We're going to fill those on the next row. So 1, 2, 3. Hold it perpendicular, come up on the inside. And I love using this variegated thread for a pattern like this because I love how it sort of undulates through the pattern of this stitch. And this is a stitch that I'm not sure I have ever stitched it before, and I actually had to practice this one quite a bit before I started filming. Now this one, that's below the seam, so I can just finish this off out here. And I'm going to knot that. So I do recommend practicing this one before you stitch it on a final piece, just because until you really understand the flow of it, it can seem really complicated. Once you understand the flow of it, it's actually not too bad. You're really just stitching row after row of buttonhole stitches, but they're just overlapping one another. Now I have another thread here that's ready to go, and I'm going to come up here. Here's that first gap that we have. Now we're going to be in line with this first one. So we're going to come up in the center, but directly below that one. And because the bottom of that stitch is hidden, I'm going to go down, and I'm just going to bury it underneath that other patch. And I'm going to come up on the next line down. And now here's that gap. Here's that first stitch that we did. So we're going to come up straight underneath it. Bring our thread down, perpendicular, come up inside it, catch it, and we're going to do that all the way across. Again, holding it perpendicular, come up inside. Now that one's going to finish out right on the edge here. But let's look at this, because this is right on my seam here. I actually feel like I need to come over, because just in case that seam ends up here, I want to make sure that stitch looks like it's through all the way. So I'm going to come over and make another one. So I'm coming way out into my seam allowance here for that one. And then I'm going to turn it over and make a knot. And now we're down for the next link. And so you see now these are starting to, how it fills in here. So here's our next gap. And again, I can't start down here and finish that because that's all hidden. So I'm just going to come up here in the middle and go down. It's easier for me to stay with the pattern, stitching a little bit the opposite direction there. Now I'm going to come up on my line down here. I'm going to again try and tuck it under the edge of this piece. I'm not stitching into it. My next seam that goes along here will tighten that down. And we're coming back up here. So there's 1, 2, we're coming up straight underneath in that gap. Hold my thread down perpendicular. Come up inside, pull it tight. And so as you get these additional rows on, you really start to see that woven effect that this has. And I know some people say it's akin to brickwork, and I think that's probably where it gets the name battlement. And again, I'm finishing this one off because I think it's going to be close enough to my seam. I want to make sure that the stitch looks complete. Now I'm starting to get to a point where I don't have a lot of distance here, but that still would be bringing a thread from here all the way back over here. It's still pretty long, so I'm going to turn it over, make a knot. I try not to go longer than an inch ever, and if I am going a full inch, I really would like to weave that through somehow, so I don't have those long floaters on the back. And if I can't do that easily, then I'll make a knot. And on this one, I definitely wanted to make the knot. There's a lot of stitches on the back. We'll take a look at that when we finish this block. We'll turn it over and look at it because I think on this one in particular, that's real interesting. So now we're looking at where's our next step. So we came down 1, 2, that was our number 2. So now we're on the third one. So here's our gap. Come up in the middle. And we're going to go down under that other block. Make it look like that stitch comes through. And we're going to come up just on the inside under that other patch. There's the next gap. Now, because there's our 1, 2, 3. And hold that down perpendicular. So you want to see that straight line from stitch to stitch underneath it. And that's right at my seam, but this is above my seam, so I'm going to go ahead and keep going. Finish the pattern off. Otherwise, it will just not look finished. Okay, and now we've got a pretty short distance to go. So I'm going to go ahead and come back, and I'm going to come back up here. Now we're under our first original stitch. I'm going to marking and going down parallel with those. We're going to come up over here under that fabric. So it continues out from underneath. There's 1, 2, 3. We're coming right underneath. And this one's pretty close here. And then where are we at here? So then this one, there's a top one. And you know, you look at it and you think, okay, I'm done. Well, not quite. We need to come back and put in these little short stitches here. I don't know that we're going to get any of the horizontal stitches in. I think those are all in, but we need to put this one in here. And I'm just going to bring it straight down. Oops, there's that dry skin attacking again. I started back up to my seasonal job at the garden center, so my hands are going to be a little dry here. Now this is outside of my seam, but this one is still inside my seam, just barely. I just want it to look finished. And you can barely see it, but it's a continuation as we go. So I'm really happy with how that looks. I like the way the color variegation works in that one, and I love the woven look of it, the brickwork-like pattern of it. It's really a fun stitch, and it adds a lot of texture and interest to a block. And so if you have an uninteresting piece of fabric or something that's kind of glaring and not working in your project, think about how you can stitch over it with something like this and turn it into something that goes better with the rest of your block. So that is Battlement Stitch Buttonhole. So what we're going to be doing now is a stitch called Knotted Buttonhole. This is one that looks really simple because you think, oh, I'm going to stitch that just like a pistol stitch, but it doesn't work that way. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, but I'm working on a 6-seam block because we're really doing 5 stitches, but we're going to do 2 variations of one of them. Let's keep this one simple. Let's just go every 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just marking my 1/4 inch marks. This is one that if I was stitching and not filming, I probably would not mark. And I'm just going to draw a light line across the top where the stitch is going to end. Let's do this knotted buttonhole. I did not find this one an easy stitch to do. It definitely was a challenge for me. I'm going to start off out here in my seam. That's where my knot is going to be so that when I go to stitch the blocks together, I'm not stitching over the knot. Now I'm going to take my thread. I'm going to wrap it over my finger and around so that the end comes underneath the other thread. I'm going to put my needle through that. I'm going to look at where my mark is. I'm going to go up to the top. And you want to keep this down low, and you want to kind of scoop stitch this one. Now once you have your needle coming out over that bottom thread, you want to pull this tight. And then I usually try and hold it, and then you get a knot. So I'm going to show you this a number of times because, like I said, for me it was not an easy stitch. I have a hard time keeping the tension even in here. So we're going to go over our finger and turn it so that the thread is loose on the bottom. We're going to go through that, come out where you want the top of your stitch to be, scoop it, coming out at the bottom, over your thread, pull that up nice and tight. Once you're out over that thread, pull this tight. And then I have found it helpful to kind of hold my threads here because I don't want them bunching up because that'll make it more difficult. And it makes a little knot. It's like a mini French knot. So grab my thread so you can see I'm over my finger so it twists on the bottom. You see that? Go through that, go down on my line, scoop up under this loose thread but over my bottom thread, pull that tight. Want to pull that tight. And there it makes a little knot. I think this is one of those stitches that would look better in a heavier thread. I don't have a good heavyweight thread in the colors that goes with this block. Pick it up. I'm going to pinch it between my thumb and forefinger, wrap it over so that the loose end comes out underneath. I'm going to mark it. Go there. So I'm going to bring it out on the seam line over that bottom line. I want to pull that snug. And there you get a little knot. I always want to go in before I make the knot, and you don't do that. So around your finger, so the thread comes out underneath the other thread. Go down, scoop it down, and I didn't pull my thread. I noticed you want that thread to be around the needle if you can. You get a better knot. And see, I just bunched up. So you're going to get a good look at some of the issues I have had with this particular stitch in hopes that it helps you. So the knots are not super big on this one. And that's one of the reasons I think it would come out better with a bigger thread. So this would be a good spot for a size 5 or even a size 3 thread or 6 strands of embroidery floss. So I'm going to go down here, scoop down to the bottom, make sure that that comes around there before I push my needle through, tighten that up, because otherwise you get this loose stitch here. We're going to pull that through, trying to keep them from getting too tangled up. And see, I didn't get that one pulled tight enough, and so it's a little bit loose. This is one that you can't really loosen the tension or change the tension once you make it. So around your finger, make that little crossover, go down on the top, scoop to the bottom, pull it snug so you've got good tension on both sides, and then pull it down. So let's do it again. Over your finger, under, so you've got that thread, loose thread coming under. I would imagine that making a shorter stitch would also help with this one. I'm pulling it taut. This is the place where I keep messing up. I don't always remember to pull it tight there. And if I hold that out so it comes down straight and doesn't get tangled, that helps. And so over my finger, I'm going to turn it so it crosses, coming up here, scooping down to my seam. So I'm over that bottom thread. Now we're going to tighten it up. Pull it through. See, I think I could get my tension even tighter than what I'm doing. So over my finger. And if somebody has done this stitch and has a tip for me, I would love to hear it. So now we're going to tighten that up. And I must have stitched. Okay, let's back that up. I caught a thread of my fabric out there. Okay, so let's try that again. So over the finger, around, so the cross loose end comes over, go down where I want the top to be, scoop up. Now we're going to pull that snug, so it's snug top and vertical. I'm going to watch that top thread as it comes down. Yeah, it's just a little tiny knot there around the finger, and then you sort of twist it up, go down. I'm going to scoop up. Don't want to catch that thread, just want to catch this one. I'm going to snug it up. And then down. And I think with that one, we're running into this other seam, so I'm just going to run it off to meet that, and we're going to call that one good. Truthfully, this is the one that looks the hardest, but for me, on this seam, this was the hardest one because I had a hard time keeping my tension on that one. And I hope that my little tips have helped you. I love the look of it, but I do think it would be better in a thicker thread And make sure you're watching that tension. Make sure you're using that scoop stitching method. That is knotted buttonhole. We have 2 more variations to go, and they're both basically the same stitch, but with just a minor change in them. And I think I need to turn my block around. If I'm stitching in hand, I like that because it's really easy to maneuver and change things as I go. If you're stitching in the frame, you've got to stop and make it work for you. This one is called an up and down buttonhole stitch. Now we're going to revisit this one when we get to feather stitch as well, because there's a version called feathered buttonhole that we're going to be doing. Before I get too far here, let's go ahead and mark this seam out because otherwise it's not going to look as nice. This seam is curving just ever so slightly, so we're going to kind of work around that curve. Let's do this one every 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to start here. And I'm just rotating my ruler as we work around the stitch. I'm not going to mark the top. I'm just going to eyeball it as we go. So on this one, I'm going to make a buttonhole stitch. And I'm going to bring it out about 1/4 of an inch. So the first half of this is just like we did. Now this is that loose edge and I want to secure it down, so I'm actually coming up through the edge rather than in the seam below. Now the next one, you would think that we're going to do it the same way, but we're not. Now we're going to come over here and we're going to go down here and we're going to come up here, and I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to wrap around that needle. So we're going to pull it out and it looks like, what are we doing? But we're going to come this way and look how it ties it together and you get this interesting little V going here. So this one we're going to come and make our normal buttonhole. You can hold it down if you want. These are going to flare a little bit, so it's not going to matter a lot what you're doing here. Now this one we're going to go down right next to it. And you're going to come up over here, but you're going to wrap around that needle. You don't have to pull this way, you can just pull down that way and it knots them together automatically. This also is one that you often see on vintage crazy quilts. And so right next to it, and then you're going to come up. I like to make that stitch a little farther apart, but you could make them exactly parallel if you wanted, and then just pull it together. So go up here, come down, go down right next to it, up to the top. I'm going to just pull my thread over it and it pulls down and knots it. So this one, once you learn it, is really a quick and easy stitch to do. It's not hard and it just always looks really nice. And then we're going to come up. Oh, I forgot to go around it, so I can just thread through, pull it down. There we are. Now I'll go up. I feel like my stitches are getting shorter and shorter here, so I just made that one a smidgen taller. Go down right next to it, come up next to the top, go over it, pull it down, go over here, make a regular buttonhole. Now go down right next to it, come up next to the top, but bring your thread over, knot it. And we're going to go ahead and put one more in here because it'll sneak in right in between those crossed buttonhole stitches that we did earlier. Go down right next to it, come up here, but go through that, tie it down, and that one we're just going to go right down next to that. And that is our up and down buttonhole stitch. We're going to do the same stitch again down here. I don't want to work toward me. I'd rather work away from me. So I'm going to turn it this direction. Let's make marks again. And if I want to make it look different than this, I can put my stitches closer together. I could make them taller. I'm going to make them the same distance apart, but I'm going to make them a little taller. So I think I want my last stitch here. So I'm doing 3/8 of an inch. That works. But let's just draw a line. Let's actually take that one up 3/8 of an inch. So they'll be 3/8 of an inch apart and 3/8 of an inch tall. It'll be a little bit different than what we did. I'm starting out here in my seam allowance. And we're going to do the same thing, but this time instead of making it come straight up, I'm going to angle it back. So these are going to flare just a little bit. And I'm going out here in my seam allowance because I want my stitch to continue through so that it's visually complete even when the blocks are sewn together and there's a tiny bit of it showing. And so now we're going to go down right next to it. And I got my thread twisted there. See how that twisted? Just loosen that up, straighten it out. And now we're going to come up and we're going to go out. I'm going to make sure that goes over my thread. I'm going to pull that down nice and snug. And look at that V that you get. And I really like that. So here's my middle mark. I'm coming back. And I'm coming back up here. And I can tell my thread caught. It's just twisted around itself on the back. And now we're going to go down right next to it. But we're flaring out, so I'm coming out here. Go around that thread. And so pull your tension so that it all pulls together properly. That's the nice thing with buttonhole, most of the time you can do that. Now here's our stitch. If we came straight up to that line, we're coming back. Come up at our bottom dot. And again, don't pull so tight, so I'm starting to buckle that fabric there. So I pulled that last one just a little too tight. I'm going to come, nope, I'm not going to come out there. That would be normal, but we're not going to do that. We're going to go down here. Got that loop, so just go out and come up above that loop. And see, I pulled it too tight and that thread started to buckle the fabric, so just keep an eye on that. There's where that center would be. Come over to the side. Come up at the dot. So I'm really coming up just to the left of my dot. And now this one we're going to go just to the right of the dot. I'm going to come up over to the side, go through that loop. There we go. Now this one, we're coming up here. Well, see, that thread just keeps getting twisted around one another. So come up on the left side of the dot. Oh, and I keep wanting to pull that too tight. So loosen it up if you need to, and then go on the right side of the dot. So our stitches are really right next to one another, but you're using that dot sort of as a guide. And then you can kind of pull on that and tighten this, but not pull that too tight, just to help give you a little bit of leeway. Now straight up and then over. Just up on the left side, barely on the left side of that. We're gonna, nope, don't go to the top. This is one of those where it's a little bit backwards from what we've been doing. And we're coming up there, going through that loop that we've developed. Now see, this is where I can pull this leg of it and tighten that, and that helps keep me from tightening that too much. And now I'm running into this other seam, so I'm just going to pull that all the way down to the seam line and finish that seam off. And there we have our second kind of open variation of up and down buttonhole stitch. So let me turn that over and make a knot. This is our 7th block for the buttonhole stitch. We've got our herringbone buttonhole combination. We have our crossed buttonhole, our battlement stitch, knotted buttonhole, and then the up and down buttonhole, and then the open up and down buttonhole. And that is the stitches for today. Now let's take a look at the back side of this block, because I want you to see the back of this battlement stitch. Here we are on the back, and you can see I pulled a little tight on this one. You can see where it's kind of pulling the fabric up a little bit. Even on the shorter version of it, it did that a little bit. But look at the back of the battlement, how you just have those straight lines going up and down. I find that really interesting. And here's where I pulled over as we got a little closer, so I was about 1 inch long, and then my next set of stitches helped to tack that down. But I really like that stitch. I'm just really pleased with it. I think it turned out beautifully. I'm just really happy with it. So let me know what you think of these stitches. Do you have a favorite one? Is there one that you think you might try, or one that you'll leave alone? Thank you so much for being here with me today as we stitched these 6 variations of buttonhole stitch. I struggled a little bit with that knotted buttonhole stitch, and I definitely need some more practice before I'm using that one on a block. But I love the effect of it, so it's one to work on. I was really surprised by Battlement Stitch. That was also a new to me stitch, and I have fallen in love with it. I love the look of it. I love the woven look, and especially with variegated thread, how it just sort of undulates the color throughout the block. I use up and down buttonhole quite frequently, and I really love the look of that one. We're going to be revisiting that again when we do feather stitch, because there's a slightly different variation to the ones that we did today. Thanks so much for watching. Wish you a beautiful day, happy stitching, and I'll see you in the next video.